Aliens watch in shock as humans dive into battle. Earth Lab Research Station, perched between Mars and Jupiter in the vast emptiness of space, was humanity's most advanced outpost, both a beacon of scientific hope and a shield of planetary defense. Sleek corridors of reinforced titanium labs, humming with life and data streams from across the solar system, made it feel more like a living organism than a facility. For years, EarthLab had probed the cosmos, developed cutting-edge technologies, and safeguarded Earth's interests. But nothing could have prepared them for what came next. In the command center, Captain Marcus Hale stood tall amidst the glow of control panels and data streams. The atmosphere was unusually quiet, almost too perfect, until suddenly warning klaxons shrieked and every screen flared red. Unidentified signals breaching the outer perimeter, shouted Corporal Tamsin from the comms desk, her hands flying across the interface. They're bypassing our encryption protocols. Impossible, Alan Knight muttered under his breath as he reviewed the flood of code on his console. These signatures, they're not random. They're coordinated. Then the view screen ignited in a violent cascade of light. Without warning, a massive warship appeared, its silhouette like an ancient leviathan, all jagged limbs and glowing undulating spines. A Noxian vessel. In seconds more emerged behind it, pushing through a rippling spatial fracture, like sea monsters surging from the deep. Marcus grabbed the intercom mic. "This is Captain Hale. All units to battle stations. Defensive systems up now." But before the orders could fully register, one of the Noxian ships slammed into EarthLab's outer shield, sending shockwaves through the station. Alarms screamed. Lights flickered. Engineers scrambled. Lieutenant Natalie Cruz, tactical officer and second-in-command, appeared at Marcus's side, her sharp eyes scanning the chaos. Multiple enemy contacts. "They're inside the firing range already. We were caught with our pants down, sir." "No kidding," Marcus growled. "Status of our cannons." "Offline," replied Chief Engineer Alan Knight from a nearby terminal, frustrated in his voice. "They hit our primary power junction. I'm rerouting emergency backups." Marcus's voice was calm but sharp. "Then do it fast. We don't get a second shot." Outside, Noxian warships slithered through the debris field with terrifying grace. They weren't just ships, they were predatory organisms of metal and energy. Long, whip-like tendrils lashed out and tore through EarthLab's outer plates as if peeling back foil. Each pulse of their weapons cut through steel and shielding with unnatural precision. Natalie turned to Marcus. "They're not here for conquest, they're here for extermination." Another tremor rocked the station, this time followed by the screams of twisting metal. A massive energy lance tore through the East Wing's docking bay. From his terminal, Daniel Pierce, the electronic warfare specialist, cursed. "We've lost comms with subsection B," he reported. "Auto repair drones have been scrambled, but it's not looked good. Redirect the medbays," Marcus ordered. "Triage the wounded and get the non-combatants into lower levels. I want defensive squads sealing every corridor." Natalie activated her headset. "Security teams Echo Delta and Sigma fall back to core sector. Protect the reactor. We hold that, or we all go up in smoke." Suddenly, static hissed across the main screen as the station's external cameras were hijacked by interference. But before they went fully dark, everyone glimpsed a terrifying sight, a second wave of Noxian ships spilling out from the space gate like an invasion force perfectly timed. Alan slammed a fist on the console. "It's not just brute force. They planned this. They studied us." Natalie drew a breath, her voice quiet but fierce. "We underestimated them. Everyone did." Marcus stared at the screen, his knuckles white on the edge of the console. "Then we learn fast, or we die slower." Engineers and soldiers darted through the station, coordinating impromptu defense lines, dragging power cables, rerouting systems. Sparks flew from busted panels. Fires erupted and were doused in flickering suppression clouds. This wasn't a fight anymore, it was survival. "Fire what you can," Marcus barked. "Even if it's from handheld launchers, I want them regretting every inch they take." The station's few remaining railguns activated just long enough to fire a couple of shots, one striking a smaller Noxian ship, disorienting it. But the triumph was short-lived. The warship responded with a burst of energy that cut through a large segment of EarthLab's defense array. "Their weapon signatures are beyond anything we've cataloged," Daniel muttered, scanning the data feed. I think they're using God. It's like multi-phase wave distortion. This isn't just tech. This is designed to bypass logic. Doesn't matter, Marcus said. We fight. Natalie smirked grimly. Not much of a choice. Then make every shot count. Outside, the chaos raged on. Inside Earthlab, among shattered steel and bloodied uniforms, humanity's resolve began to harden like cooled metal. They had been caught off guard but not broken. Not yet. The heart of Earthlab beat erratically, pulsing with the sounds of chaos, alarms wailing, conduits exploding, and engineers yelling across smoke-filled chambers. And yet, through all of it, Captain Marcus Hale stood unmoved in the central control chamber, surrounded by fractured glass and blinking consoles. "Report," Marcus barked, wiping soot from his cheek as he braced against the command desk. Natalie Cruz, crouched beside a smoking panel, tapped into a backup system. "We're running blind. Optical feeds are down. Comms still jammed. Defensive grids at 30% and dropping." Alan Knight, his hands blackened with electrical residue, popped open a maintenance panel. "Primary conduits are fried. If we don't reroute power soon, we're just a tin can waiting to be crushed." Marcus clenched his jaw. "Then we make do. I want countermeasures online. Anything we've got." That was when Natalie's eyes narrowed. She tapped into an auxiliary console. "Wait, we can still access the electromagnetic warfare suite." Marcus looked over sharply. "You mean the thing we haven't field tested? Better an untested system than a funeral?" Natalie replied. "It was designed for situations just like this: high-threat, high-frequency enemy targets." She turned to the intercom, voice calm and commanding. "All units switch to EW protocol. Prepare for a disruption burst. This is not a drill." Elsewhere in the station, buried within a shielded tech lab, Lieutenant Daniel Pierce activated the dormant system. "Initiating scramble pulses now. Hope this doesn't fry us along with them." The system flared to life. High-powered electromagnetic waves surged from deep within the station's core, invisible but potent, their purpose to disable anything built on frequency control or advanced neural synchronization. Out in space, the effect was immediate. Noxian warships, so smooth and graceful moments ago, lurched in space. Their movements grew erratic. One even spun out of formation, colliding with its neighbor in a tangle of tendrils and flickering lights. Back inside Earthlab, Daniel let out a short laugh. "We actually scrambled them. The bastards didn't see that coming." Natalie's lips twitched into the faintest smile. "How's that for alien superiority?" Marcus stepped closer, staring at the tactical feed with grim satisfaction. "Let's not get cocky. They'll adapt." And indeed they would, because while Earthlab's electromagnetic gambit was effective, it was only a stopgap. The Noxians were many, and they were learning, but so was humanity. Alan suddenly shouted from across the room, "I've got something, a weapon system buried in our contingency files. Codenamed Ghost Star." Natalie arched a brow. "That's not in the standard deployment chart. That's because it was experimental." Alan was already typing frantically. "A project buried deep, low-profile, off-record. Weapons built into the substructure of Earthlab itself. Designed for emergencies too dire to imagine." Marcus gave a single nod. "You've got permission. Bring it online." With a hiss of pressure and a groan of metal, sealed compartments opened along the underside of the station. Hidden turrets emerged like fangs from the belly of a sleeping giant. They locked onto disabled Noxian vessels. "Firing Ghost Star systems," Alan confirmed. Pulses of white-hot energy lanced through the void. Compact but devastating, the projectiles bored into the disabled alien vessels. Two Noxian ships detonated in silent, furious eruptions of green plasma and oily black fragments. Direct hits, Natalie breathed. They didn't even have time to react. Marcus looked over. "Nice to know we still have surprises." Daniel tapped his earpiece. "Ghost Star isn't all. We've got electronic mines on standby. If we seed them into the debris field, they won't detect them until it's too late," Marcus finished. "Exactly." The mines deployed tiny spheres drifting innocuously into the chaos, each one housing electromagnetic disruptors and explosive payloads. When the next wave of Noxian vessels surged forward, several flew directly into the minefield. A shock wave rippled across space. On screen, one of the larger Noxian ships sparked lost power and tumbled helplessly. Another veered off course, its central systems burning from within. Targeting critical systems now, Natalie said, signaling the strike teams. Within moments, human attack shuttles launched. Coated in reflective armor and equipped with stealth drives, they slithered through the chaos like wolves among larger confused prey. These are surgical strikes, she explained to Marcus. We hit power cores, leave everything else. Psychological warfare. And it worked. Explosions danced across the hulls of Noxian ships, each one a precise and brutal counterattack. For the first time, the aliens faltered. Their formation broke. In the control room, Daniel slammed his fist on the table. They're panicking. We've got them on the run. Not yet, Marcus said, voice steady. This is just the opening move. Down in the engineering decks, Alan worked alongside a team of exhausted but focused techs. Sparks flew. Power was rerouted. Critical systems blinked back online. This is insane, one of the junior techs muttered. We're throwing junk at gods. Alan just grinned. And yet somehow it's working. By the hour's end, Earthlab was no longer a helpless station on the brink of collapse. It was a battlefield, and humanity was holding the line. Even Marcus allowed himself a moment of reflection. Standing before a cracked observation window, he watched the damaged Noxian fleet spiral in space confusion and uncertainty, beginning to ripple through their once perfect formation. They thought we'd roll over, he murmured. They forgot who we are. Natalie stepped up beside him. We're not the strongest, not the fastest, but when everything else fails, we adapt, Marcus finished, and we bite back. The battle was far from over, but Earthlab was no longer prey. The storm of battle had calmed, if only slightly. Earthlab's orbit stabilized, though much of the station remained in tatters. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in red, and the low hum of auxiliary power systems was a stark reminder that this war was far from over. Inside the intelligence hub, one of the few undamaged command nodes, Lieutenant Daniel Pierce, hunched over a holographic display lines of alien codes swirling in front of him like a digital storm. Static pulsed through the air as he filtered through terabytes of intercepted Noxian data gathered during the electronic warfare surge. Captain Hale Daniel called out, eyes wide behind his cracked visor. I think you should see this. Marcus approached, followed closely by Natalie Cruz and Dr. Linda Chen. The tension in the room was palpable. What have you got? Marcus asked, arms folded across his chest. It's weird, Daniel muttered, fingers flying across his interface. These aren't just command and control protocols. There's biological data embedded in their encryption layers. And this pattern here, he zoomed in on a flickering strand of code. It looks eerily familiar. How familiar? Natalie asked, squinting at the shapes on the screen. Too familiar, Daniel whispered. He tapped a key, pulling up a second display, this one showing ancient Earth symbols. Cross-referencing the shape and frequency of these signal patterns with historical records, I matched them with something from Earth's mythological archives. Not modern, ancient. The room fell silent. Dr. Chen leaned in, her brow furrowed. Wait, you're saying their data patterns match something from human legend? Daniel nodded. Take a look. The screen filled with faded, digitized illustrations, ancient sea monsters, long-forgotten space myths, carvings of celestial beasts from lost civilizations. Each bore a resemblance to the Noxian warships, serpentine bodies, luminous crests, writhing tendrils. Natalie blinked. That's not a coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences anymore, Daniel replied. Not after what we've seen. Marcus said nothing for a long moment, then quietly, so what the hell are we dealing with? Daniel hesitated. I think these Noxians, they're not entirely alien. Linda straightened. Meaning biologically, Daniel explained, they're different. Evolved, modified, maybe even hybridized. But structurally, there are parallels. Skeletal symmetry, cranial proportions, dual limb arrangements. They're humanoid, distorted but unmistakable. Natalie took a half step back. You're saying they're human, no, Daniel corrected. I'm saying they might be a version of us. A heavy silence dropped across the room. For the first time since the war began, the fear was no longer about destruction. It was about identity. Marcus turned to Linda. Can you confirm any of this? The scientist didn't answer immediately. She adjusted her data lens and scrolled through the bioscans they'd managed to pull from one of the wrecked Noxian ships. Cranial neuropaths consistent with human architecture, she murmured. Dual lungs, four-chambered heart. DNA not identical, but compatible enough to suggest a common ancestor. Natalie's voice was hoarse. So they are us. Or what we might have become, Linda said grimly. Marcus paced slowly, rubbing his temple. We always wondered what happened to the long-range colony ships, the ones launched during Earth's early expansion era. Some went dark, never came back. You think they evolved into this? Natalie asked. I don't know, Marcus muttered. But if they did, they wouldn't come back to say hello. The team stared at the display, now showing side-by-side comparisons between early human explorers and the Noxian physiology. The similarities were haunting, the differences terrifying. Linda looked up. It makes sense. If a colony ship got lost near a gravitational anomaly, if they were exposed to radiation or unknown substances, if time warped or evolution took a different path, or if they were changed on purpose, Daniel added darkly. Engineered. Natalie crossed her arms tightly. But why attack us if they're connected to humanity? Why show up with weapons drawn? Marcus looked at the flickering screen, his voice low and heavy. Maybe they don't see us as kin anymore. Maybe we're the version that failed, the one they came to erase. The idea hung in the air like smoke. Linda shook her head. There's another possibility. They might not even know who we are. If they've diverged far enough, they could see us as a threat, or worse, an infection. Natalie turned to Marcus. So what now? Do we keep fighting them, or do we try to reach out? We keep fighting, Marcus said without hesitation, until we can reach out, until we understand them. But we don't drop our guard. Daniel leaned back in his chair, exhausted. You know what this means, right? Every shot we fire now, we could be killing a version of ourselves. Marcus met his gaze. We already were, from the moment they opened fire. Silence again, this time heavier than before. In the background, the holographic map was updated with new Noxian ship positions, less aggressive, more spread out. As if they were watching, thinking. Marcus looked around at his team, battle-worn, bruised but unbroken. Double all research into their origins. I want genetic comparisons, tech tracebacks, behavioral modeling. If they're part of us, I want to know everything. And if they're not, Natalie asked. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Then we know exactly what we're up against. The lights flickered again. Somewhere deep in the station, an explosion rumbled in the distance. But here in this room, a deeper war had just begun, a war of meaning, identity, and history. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to understand who and what they really were. In the aftermath of discovery, a quiet unease spread through EarthLab like a virus of its own, unseen but undeniable. The alarms had dimmed, the immediate threat had retreated, but inside every corridor, every control room, and every crew member's chest, a question echoed louder than any explosion. What if we're not fighting aliens? What if we're fighting ourselves? The central command room was dimly lit, its main screen still cycling through intercepted Noxian footage and physiological scans. Captain Marcus Hale stood at the window, arms behind his back, staring at the fractured vastness of space. The glow of distant stars offered no comfort, now only cold possibilities. Behind him, Natalie Cruz broke the silence. How do we justify this, she asked, arms crossed. If they're even remotely related to us, how do we call this war anything but a civil one? Marcus didn't turn. They fired first. Because we existed, Natalie countered. What if that's the only reason, Doctor? Linda Chen entered quietly, datapad in hand, her expression unreadable. She placed it on the console beside Marcus. We completed another genetic sweep, she said. They're not just similar, they're adjacent. Their DNA shares markers from early human colonization genomes, pre-expansion era. Which means they came from us, Marcus said grimly. No, Linda corrected, tapping a string of data. They are us. Or at least they were. Natalie leaned forward, eyes narrowed. So they're survivors of a colony mission we never recovered. Linda nodded. It's likely. Their evolution diverged radically. Different gravity, different atmosphere, different pressures on biology and psychology. It could explain the morphology and the aggression. Generations removed, Daniel Pierce chimed in over the comm from the lab. If their social structure adapted in isolation long enough and deep enough, they wouldn't see us as kin. Just another branch to be pruned. Marcus finally turned from the window. His face was tired but hard. Then they become something else. And if that something is hostile, we still have to ask ourselves the real question. Linda interrupted, her voice rising. Are we trying to win a war or exterminate a reflection that made the room go silent? Across from her, Alan Knight rubbed a hand through his hair, stained with oil and sweat. We didn't ask for this, he said. We built this place to protect Earth, not to pick fights with lost cousins. Lost cousins who blew a hole in our docking ring and killed half our engineering wing, Natalie said sharply. They're not showing restraint, Alan. No, Alan agreed. But neither are we. Daniel's voice returned in a low whisper over the comms. I've been reviewing intercepted transmissions. They're not just commands. There are symbols, patterns, repeated phrases. One of them translates roughly as, purge the corrupted strain. Natalie's face went pale. They see us as the infection. Marcus exhaled slowly, pressing both palms against the edge of the console. So we're a mistake in their eyes, a failed timeline, and they've returned to fix it. Linda shook her head. But what gives them the right? Who gets to decide what version of humanity deserves to survive? No one answered. The weight of that question was too great. Maybe we're both wrong, Alan muttered after a moment. Maybe neither side deserves the universe. Not after what we're doing to it. Natalie looked over at him. You think this was avoidable? I think we stopped asking why a long time ago, he replied. Marcus stared at the slowly rotating image of a Noxian battleship on the central screen. Elegant, terrifying, familiar in ways it shouldn't be. When I signed up, he said quietly, I knew I'd have to make hard calls, send people into fire, watch good friends die. But I never thought I'd be standing here wondering if I'm shooting at people who could have been us. Linda approached him gently, placing a hand on his arm. You don't have to bear that alone. I do, Marcus said, because I'm the one giving the orders. A pause. Then he straightened. But let me be clear. Until we know for certain what they are, what they want, we continue to defend this station. We don't open negotiations to an enemy that opens fire first, but we don't dehumanize them either, Linda said. Not if there's even a chance they are human. Natalie looked between them. So what do we call this? A war? A reclamation? A reunion? Marcus met her eyes. We call it what it is, a reckoning. He stepped forward, voice rising with the authority of command. Double our scans. I want linguistic AI working on any intercepted communication. Anything we can decode cultural symbols, historical logs, prayer fragments, I want it in my hands. If they're reaching out, I need to know before they say their next sentence with a cannon. And if they never reach out, Daniel asked through the intercom. Then we end it, Marcus replied. Before they erase us from our own history. Linda folded her arms. Even if it means we destroy the only other human legacy in the stars, Marcus stared into the dark beyond the view glass. I'd rather survive and mourn that loss than die forgiving it. In that moment, every officer in the room understood something unspoken. The enemy was no longer just out there in the void, it was inside each of them. It was doubt, it was guilt, it was the reflection of what they might become if pushed too far. Humanity was not simply fighting to survive, they were fighting to remember who they were. In the sterile blue glow of Earth Lab's primary data core, the atmosphere buzzed with silent urgency. Hollow screens floated in mid-air, strings of code rushing by like digital waterfalls. The hum of processors grew louder, more frantic, until it was nearly a scream. At the center of it all stood Dr. Linda Chen, her face drawn in concentration pupils, reflecting cascading code as she initiated the deployment sequence of Project Parallax, the virus designed to paralyze the Noxians from within. Final checksum complete, she reported, voice sharp and even. The virus is ready for injection. Across the room, Captain Marcus Hale and Lieutenant Natalie Cruz exchanged a glance. Natalie crossed her arms, her jaw clenched. We're really doing this, she asked. No chance to test it. No rollback protocol. It's either this, Linda said without turning, or we watch the Noxians turn EarthLab into a crater. Again. Marcus gave a single nod. Deploy it. Linda pressed her hand against the interface. The lights dimmed and for a moment everything went quiet. Then the code surged outward, launched through satellite relays into the battle-clogged vacuum beyond. The virus is propagating, Daniel Pierce confirmed from the cyber warfare station, his voice coming through a static-laced comm, spreading across their fleet's network. Seconds passed, then confirmed contact, Daniel announced. The virus is taking root. Systems across at least 5 Noxian vessels are beginning to desync. Weapons are going dark. A cheer rippled through the ops room. Natalie allowed herself a half smile. Damn, she said. We actually got them. Begin phase 2, Marcus ordered. Sever their command structure. Take out any ship that goes dark. But the smile faded quickly. Daniel's voice returned, laced with alarm. Wait, something's wrong. What is it? Marcus asked, already moving toward the display. Daniel's screen began to flicker. Feedback loop. We're seeing signals bleed from their systems. But it's not staying isolated. It's reflecting, bouncing back toward us. A cold spike of dread cut through the room. Linda's fingers flew across the console. It's not just reflecting, it's rewriting segments of our own system code. We've triggered recursive behavior. Natalie's brow furrowed. Speak English. The virus is attacking us, Linda snapped. It's mutating, adapting to our architecture. Turning around and infecting EarthLab. Systems dropping offline, shouted an engineer near the back. Weapons control gone. Internal sensors unresponsive. On the command display, EarthLab's vitals blinked red one by one, like arteries being clamped shut. Marcus gritted his teeth. Contain it. Kill the feed. I'm trying, Linda barked. But it's embedded into the kernel. It's not just software anymore. It's spreading like a neural parasite. Alan Knight, entering the control room with grease-stained gloves and a harried look, took one glance at the red-filled monitor and swore. What the hell did you people do? Linda didn't answer. Her face was pale. We coded the virus to mimic Noxian logic patterns. We didn't anticipate that their architecture might mirror ours. You mean they think like us, Natalie said slowly. Worse, Daniel muttered. They used to be us, which means their codebase is compatible. An electric shriek rang out as a control panel sparked violently. Smoke billowed. Main power junctions compromised, someone yelled. The virus is overriding our firewall layers, Linda said, her voice almost hoarse. We're losing control of every system. It's rewriting protocols, triggering emergency lockdowns, rerouting power into null pathways. Cut the uplink, Marcus ordered. Physically sever the connection between infected nodes and core systems. Alan was already moving. On it. I'll need 5 minutes. You have 2. As engineers sprinted to unplug servers and isolate processors, chaos reigned. In a matter of minutes, EarthLab had gone from aggressor to crippled host. Lights flickered. Turrets jammed. Life support in some sections began to fail. Natalie grabbed the nearest headset. Redirect all combat personnel to protect medical and engineering bays. If this station falls, it won't be to enemy fire, it'll be because we blew out our own damn spine. On the screen, the Noxian ships that had been paralyzed began to stir systems, rebooting, lights flaring to life. They've adapted, Daniel whispered. They absorbed the attack, and they learned from it. Marcus stared at the screen, jaw tight. Then we gave them a gift wrapped in fire. This was supposed to be our last resort, Linda said, her voice breaking. Our edge. But we didn't build a weapon, we built a mirror. Outside, the Noxians surged forward again, this time with adjusted formation patterns, tighter, more erratic, as if anticipating humanity's usual tactics. Inside, Marcus clenched his fists. How bad is it? Linda's eyes stayed on the flickering displays. Best case. We get the system firewalled in time. Worst case, EarthLab's entire infrastructure collapses. We go dark. We're going to die. Alan's voice came in through the comms. Physical break complete. We're rerouting to clean backups. Daniel chimed in a beat later. Systems are stabilizing. Barely. It's still in the wiring. Like it's alive. A tense silence followed. Then Marcus spoke, quiet but resolute. We created this virus because we thought we could outthink them, outsmart our own reflection. He looked around the room, burnt, battered, full of shaken faces. Turns out reflections fight back. Earth Lab limped, bruised, but not broken. The virus had been contained for now. But the lesson burned brighter than any plasma flare. Humanity's greatest threat wasn't alien technology or overwhelming force. It was their own arrogance, their belief that intelligence alone would be enough. And as the Noxians began to regroup for another assault, Marcus Hale made a silent vow they would never rely on untested genius again. Not while the cost was survival itself. A dull blue pulse echoed through Earth Lab's central systems, steady, faint, but unlike anything they'd ever recorded. It began in silence, tucked away in the remnants of corrupted code they had salvaged from the virus incident. Daniel Pierce sat alone at the analytics terminal in the darkened cyber warfare wing headphones, hanging loose, eyes wide as an unfamiliar waveform danced across his screen. "This isn't feedback," he murmured. "This is patterned, intentional." He tapped his comms. "Captain Hale, Dr. Chen, you'll want to see this." Within minutes, the command team gathered around his console. Linda Chen studied the frequency readouts, her brows furrowed. "It's oscillating," she whispered, "but it's not noise. It's symmetrical. Repeating." Marcus leaned in. "Are we intercepting Noxian transmissions again?" "No," Daniel said, shaking his head. "It's not a communication signal. It's space-time interference." Alan Knight, arriving late, caught the last word and immediately frowned. "Interference from what we're not near a black hole." Linda magnified the data feed, isolating the wave harmonics. The image that emerged on the holodisplay was mesmerizing, two loops crossing, folding into themselves endlessly, like a Mobius strip rendered in quantum motion. "This isn't interference," she said slowly. "It's a rift, a space gate." Natalie crossed her arms. "Define space gate." "It's theoretical," Linda said, eyes never leaving the screen. "A rupture in space-time that links distant points or even alternate realities. A kind of tunnel through dimensions. Einstein-Rosen bridge theory with quantum layering." Alan blinked. "You're saying we just found a wormhole?" "Not quite," Linda replied. "Wormholes bend space to connect distance. This gate bends probability. It's not just a shortcut across space, it's a passage through timelines. Parallel futures, alternate histories." There was silence. Then Marcus said flatly, "You're telling me we've got a door to other versions of reality?" Linda turned toward him. "Yes, and it's pulsing, actively." Natalie raised an eyebrow. "Is it natural?" No, Daniel cut in. "That's the thing. The patterns are too clean, too consistent. Someone built this." A hush fell over the room. Linda stepped forward and overlaid the waveform data with gravitational distortion readings taken during the last Noxian fleet movement. "It formed after the last wave of Noxian warships arrived," she said, "which means they may not have traveled across space the way we assumed. They could have come through this." Alan's face paled. "You mean we're not fighting invaders from another star system? We're fighting versions of humanity from a future we didn't live in. Or a future we might become," Linda said softly. Marcus didn't blink. "Can we control it?" "Unclear," Daniel said. "The gate's anchored by a pulse, something's feeding it energy. But we've isolated the frequency. With enough power we could stabilize it. Maybe even open it fully." Natalie turned to Marcus. "You thinking what I'm thinking, Recon?" he said. "If this thing leads to parallel timelines, we need to know what's on the other side." Linda hesitated. "It could be dangerous, unstable. And if time runs differently over there, we could lose people days, years, maybe permanently." "We've sent people into worse situations," Marcus replied. "If this gate is how the Noxians travel, we need to understand it." "We're done playing blind," Natalie nodded. "I'll lead the team." Linda raised a hand. "Then you'll need this." She pulled up schematics for an experimental device, an anchor beacon that could tether someone to this reality using quantum resonance. "Still untested," she said. "But it might bring you back. If things go wrong." Natalie smirked. "When don't they?" Within hours, the expedition team stood on a launch platform near Earth Lab's core ring. A ring of rotating stabilizers whirled around them, humming louder as the gate's frequency sync aligned with their generators. Sparks danced as the fabric of reality stretched before them, warping light like liquid glass. Marcus stood with Natalie, their helmets nearly touching, in the pressurized airlock. "If you see another version of me," he said, "tell him I'm not impressed." She gave him a small grin. "Copy that, Captain." Alan's voice came through the comms. "Energy levels are spiking. The gate is opening, maintaining magnetic stabilization." The space in front of the team split open. And beyond it, a corridor of stars, a storm of light. Structures unlike anything they'd seen, half station, half organism, floating in a parallel void. Ships moved in formations unfamiliar with colors that danced across the visible spectrum like living flame. "Are we recording this?" Natalie asked, her voice hushed. Daniel's voice crackled in. Every frame. Suddenly a shape moved. Something massive. A warship, but with a design that mimicked Earth's earliest colony vessels, fused with Noxian architecture. Linda gasped through the feed. "That's not just another timeline. That's a convergence." Natalie stared into the breach. "We didn't just open a gate. We opened a mirror," Marcus said quietly from behind her. The gate pulsed once more, and then faded, stabilized, waiting. EarthLab was no longer alone in the fight. Somewhere across timelines and futures, other versions of humanity, different, twisted, noble, or monstrous, waited on the other side. Now the question wasn't just about survival, it was about identity, and whether humanity was ready to face every version of itself. The space gate now loomed at the edge of EarthLab like a silent god, neither benevolent nor cruel, just there pulsing with invisible currents. It hadn't closed after the first expedition. It waited like it knew humanity hadn't made a decision yet. Inside the command center, the lights were low. Everyone moved slower now, not out of exhaustion, but caution. What they had seen on the other side had changed everything. Natalie Cruz stood in front of the central screen, arms crossed, eyes focused on a replay of the parallel warships, angular, vast, unlike anything ever designed on Earth, yet unmistakably human in silhouette. "They weren't monsters," she said finally. "They weren't aliens. Just us. Evolved. Hardened. Changed." Marcus sat nearby, silent. He hadn't spoken much since the gate stabilized, but his fingers tapped a slow rhythm on the console, his only tell. "What do we do now?" Natalie asked without looking at him. Marcus took a long breath. "We have to ask the question we've been avoiding. Are we defending Earth from an enemy or from the future?" The room fell into a hush. Alan Knight leaned back in his chair, one boot resting against the base of a torn console. "Suppose we go through that gate again. Suppose we meet them face to face. What happens when they say we don't deserve to exist, that they've seen what we become, and they're here to stop it?" Linda Chen entered carrying a pad full of data and maps from the last dimensional scan. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "They wouldn't be wrong," she said flatly, dropping the pad onto the table. "Each timeline we've glimpsed, each variant of humanity has taken different paths. Some found peace, some became tyrants, some fell into extinction, some became Noxians." Daniel's voice echoed from the comms unit. "And some are trying to wipe us out before we take their place." Natalie turned to him. "What makes them so sure we are the broken version?" "Because maybe we are," he replied. Marcus stood. "That's not their call." Linda met his gaze. "Maybe it's not yours either." A silence hung in the air, sharp, fragile. Natalie broke it first. "If we use this gate to change timelines, we risk everything. You change a detail, you change a destiny. Someone might live who was supposed to die. Or worse." "You sound like you're against using it," Marcus said. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "I'm not sure of anything anymore." Linda sat folding her hands. "Let's say we do use it. We change the timeline, wipe out the Noxians before they exist, and prevent the war before it begins. But then what? We become the thing that alters history to suit ourselves." "Where does that stop?" "It stops," Marcus said, "when we can guarantee Earth's survival." Alan shook his head. "That's the problem, Marcus. Survival isn't the same as living right." Natalie spoke quietly. "We always assumed we were the underdogs, the ones fighting to protect humanity. But what if we're the branch that shouldn't survive? What if we're the unstable version, the variant that tips the balance the wrong way?" Daniel's voice returned, now hushed. That would mean this war isn't an invasion. It's a correction. Marcus slammed his hand on the console, startling them. No. Everyone turned. We do not surrender our right to exist just because another version of us says we're flawed. We've bled, we've suffered, we've earned our place. I won't let some future reflection strip us of that. The room was quiet again. Then Linda stood slowly, walking over to the space gate interface. Her fingers hovered over it, tracing the pulse of light. This gate, it's not just a weapon, it's a mirror. It's showing us what we could be, good and bad. We were never meant to conquer it. We were meant to learn from it. Natalie nodded. Then maybe we don't change the timeline. Maybe we will watch. We learn, observe, prepare. And when the time comes, we make a choice. Marcus looked at her. And if the choice is between protecting Earth and letting the other timelines destroy us, then we fight, she said. But we fight knowing who we are, not as pawns, as people. Alan stood up, brushing off his gloves. Well, that's the first hopeful thing I've heard in weeks. Linda stepped away from the console. Then let's get to work. We map every gate, every timeline. We find out where the Noxians really came from, and maybe we figure out how to stop becoming them. Marcus nodded slowly. We don't erase the future. We will build a better one. Outside the window, the space gate pulsed again, slow, steady waiting. It was no longer just a door. It was a test. And now, for the first time, humanity understood the question. In the days that followed the gate's stabilization, EarthLab transformed from a war-ravaged station into something stranger, something new. It no longer served only as a bastion of defense or a hub of research. It had become a nexus, a beacon, broadcasting across dimensions, signaling to parallel futures that humanity was listening. And something listened back. Inside the strategy chamber, the lights dimmed to focus on the floating holomap now stretched across the center of the room. Colored threads flickered across it, each one representing a version of humanity from a different timeline. Some threads were tangled, others branched like nerves. One pulsed ominously black-marked Noxian primary vector. Natalie Cruz leaned over the console, her voice steady. We've made contact with 4 parallel Earths. 2 declined further communication. 1 offered data. The 4th wants to fight with us. Marcus Hale raised an eyebrow. They volunteered troops. Not exactly, she replied. They offered ideas. Alan Knight grinned from the back of the room, surrounded by a mess of blueprints and scattered tools. And you know how much I love stealing ideas from smarter versions of me. He tapped a button. A new schematic expanded over the map, an adaptive weapon built from molecular alteration tech, designed to convert raw material into offensive or defensive systems instantly based on battlefield conditions. They call it thread steel, Alan explained. Think of it as programmable matter. We've been working with their engineering logs to replicate it here. Any success? Marcus asked. Alan lifted a small cube from his desk. You're looking at the first-generation prototype. With a flick, the cube expanded and shifted, transforming midair into a shimmering blade. A second flick, and it dissolved into a shield. Marcus whistled low. That'll change everything. Natalie nodded. Their war against the Noxians ended in total annihilation, but not before they built weapons to disrupt the Noxians' regeneration fields. We're integrating their logic into our arsenal. Dr. Linda Chen stepped forward, datapad in hand. It's not just tech. We're building a council, a cross-timeline collaboration. Each timeline that responds adds to our archive. We're learning faster than ever before. Marcus scanned the room, and Morale, Daniel's voice, buzzed in from the secure comms unit. We've got people who've lost everything working alongside versions of themselves who survived. Some are shaken, but most, they're inspired. He paused. There's something surreal about seeing a future where you died and knowing you get to help someone else avoid that fate. Natalie turned to Marcus. This isn't just a war anymore. It's an evolution. We're not alone in this. And we don't have to be reactive. We can strike first. Marcus nodded slowly. Then it's time to rewrite the playbook. The next few days were a storm of preparation. Teams were dispatched through stabilized gates to gather intelligence. Recon squads returned with tactical models of Noxian ship behavior across timelines. Some encountered versions of Earth that had fallen. Others found strange, quiet utopias where the war never came. But every timeline carried pieces of the puzzle. From one, they recovered Noxian biological samples that mutated under light. From another, an AI logic core built to anticipate multidimensional attacks. Each discovery layered onto the next, creating new weapons, new defenses, and new strategies. Natalie addressed the officers at the next strategy session. We've begun deploying cloak-capable drones, built using logic paths from Timeline R12. They can mask their presence from Noxian sensors and deliver high-yield charges to weak points we've now mapped with 92% accuracy. High enough to matter, Marcus asked. We tested them on a skirmish fleet, she replied. 5 ships entered, none left. Applause rippled through the room. Alan stepped forward, energized. We've also adapted a waveform disruptor that triggers instability in Noxian spatial anchors. Basically, it breaks their footing, makes them drift uncontrollably through space, creative Marcus said. Risk, Alan gave a sheepish grin. Possibly everything explodes within 20 meters, but we're working on that. Meanwhile, Linda had been coordinating with the alternate Earth biologists on the Echo Protocol, a psychological strategy using implanted memory fragments and synthetic dream signals to confuse and disorient Noxian neural patterns. Using their shared evolutionary roots against them, she explained, we can simulate ancestral echoes triggers that destabilize their sense of identity, make them hesitate. Fear, doubt, psychological warfare, Marcus asked. Linda nodded. If they're even partly human, they'll respond. He didn't smile, but his eyes flickered with approval. By week's end, EarthLab wasn't just standing, it was reaching. Timeline Omega had sent schematics for a long-range spatial ripple cannon. Timeline Theta shared encryption-breaking tech that cut through Noxian comms. Even Timeline K23, a timeline nearly obliterated by its own AI rebellion, contributed a subversive virus that hijacked enemy targeting systems. In a secure conference room, Marcus addressed his inner circle. We've moved from defense to dominance, but we must stay sharp. The Noxians aren't static. They'll evolve too. Natalie leaned forward. We've seen what they're capable of when cornered. We need to assume every tactic we use becomes obsolete within a week. Linda added, that's why we don't just adapt, we collaborate. The gate is our greatest weapon because it's not ours alone. Marcus folded his hands. Then we build the alliance stronger. We keep trading, sharing, learning. Daniel's voice cut in once more. And when the time comes, we strike at the heart. Marcus looked up at the pulsating map where red timelines branched into gold. Not just for Earth, he said, for every version of us that never had this chance. Humanity wasn't simply fighting back anymore. They were rewriting the rules of engagement across realities. And the Noxians, wherever and whenever they were, would soon learn a truth buried deep in every human timeline. We may fall, but we never fall the same way twice. For a moment, EarthLab felt invincible. Between timelines, technology, and tactical brilliance, humanity had reshaped the battlefield. Battles were no longer desperate defenses, they were coordinated strikes, precise, dominant. But victory, when worn too comfortably, becomes a mask. And beneath that mask, the Noxians had been watching. It began with silence. Not the usual cold stillness of space, but something more calculated. Patrols reported fewer Noxian contacts. Engagements dropped. Recon probes sent through the gate returned with less data, fewer traces of enemy movement. Natalie Cruz frowned at her console. This doesn't feel right. Alan hunched nearby, calibrating a plasma disruptor, gave her a skeptical glance. What you miss getting shot at? I miss patterns, she said, tapping a blinking readout. They're too quiet. They've never been quiet. Marcus Hale joined them, eyes fixed on a tactical projection. Anything from the deep scans, Daniel's voice crackled through the comms. Just got the latest gravimetric pulse. And, Captain, we've got a problem. Define the problem, Marcus said. You remember how the space gate used to show one stable vector? Yeah, we just registered 9. Alan stood up straight. 9. You're saying they're opening multiple gates? Not opening, Daniel corrected. They've already opened. Synchronized, simultaneous. Natalie turned slowly toward Marcus. They've been stalling. Waiting, preparing. Marcus's face darkened. Sound general alert. All stations. This isn't a wave, it's a reckoning. It began without warning. The void outside Earth Lab lit up in a cascading spiral of color crimson arcs and blue fractures slicing across space like open wounds. The Noxian fleet emerged through those gates, but it wasn't the fleet humanity remembered. Their ships were different, larger, covered in shifting armor that adapted in real time. Their propulsion systems bent light. Weapons bristled with an energy that caused the very fabric of space to ripple. "They've upgraded," Linda whispered, eyes wide as she scanned biosignature overlays. "Their hulls are coated in living circuitry. They're growing their ships." On the main display, a dreadnought-sized vessel emerged, its core glowing white-hot, surrounded by orbiting modules that spun like moons. Natalie's throat went dry. "That's not a battleship. That's a city." Alan tapped rapidly into Earthlab's defense matrix. "Pulling energy to shields. If this thing fires, we need to." He didn't finish. Because the dreadnought did fire. A burst of soundless energy burst outward, not a beam but a field. It washed over Earthlab's outer defense ring like a wave of static, and in a heartbeat, nearly every turret, drone, and satellite system blinked offline. "EMP?" Marcus asked. "No," Alan said, horror in his voice. "Time field. They just froze our outer grid in a temporal stasis. It's not destroyed, it's paused." More ships emerged, each equipped with technology that defied logic: gravitational inversions, cloaked boarding pods, plasma disruptors that phased through hulls. Humanity's forces scrambled. Inside, Earth Lab alarms howled. Engineers ran securing breach points. Fighters launched in squadrons, but their maneuvers were tracked instantly. Noxian AI had evolved to anticipate them. For every move, the Noxians had three. "Delta Wing destroyed," came the cry through comms. "Emergency bulkhead sealed. We've got hull breaches in sections 4, 7, and 12. Natalie shouted over the chaos. "Redirect all remaining ships to flank them. Target the smaller vessels. Force them to separate." "It's not working," Daniel said, voice tight. "They're decentralized now. Every ship acts like its own command node. No weak links." Marcus clenched his fists. "Then we make one." He stormed into the central war room. "Prep the quantum disruptor. We'll overload their synchronization field." Linda rushed in behind him. "That's experimental. You activate that thing near Earth Lab and it could destabilize our own timeline." "I don't care," Marcus snapped. "We don't push them back now. We don't have a timeline left." Natalie joined him, sweat and soot streaking her face. "We need a distraction. Something big. Something they can't ignore." Alan grinned grimly. "I've got just the thing." 5 minutes later, a cluster of Earthlab drones launched from the hangar, each carrying a mirrored casing designed to reflect and distort Noxian scanners. Inside the casing, thread steel bombs adapted to detonate on thought impulse. As the drones weaved through the carnage, Alan muttered, "Come on, babies. Make Daddy proud." They exploded, each blast short-circuiting the local space with matter phase disruption. For the first time, the dreadnought staggered. Natalie seized the moment. "All ships fire everything. Hit that breach," cannons roared. Missiles howled. Across the battlefield, the tide shifted, but only slightly. For every Noxian ship they damaged, another pressed forward. Then a pulse hit Earthlab directly. A wave of silence fell as control screens dimmed. And one by one, critical systems went dark. Life support, communications, reactor stabilization. Marcus turned slowly to Linda. That was no ordinary weapon. She swallowed hard. "They've targeted our space-time integrity. They're not here to defeat us, they're here to erase us." In that moment, the confidence built over weeks evaporated. Humanity had adapted, innovated, connected across timelines. But the Noxians had evolved beyond war. They had made war irrelevant. This wasn't just a battle anymore. It was extinction, surgically executed, scientifically perfected. In Earthlab, it was seconds from collapse. The command center flickered under emergency power. The floor vibrated with distant impacts like the heartbeat of a dying giant. Sparks fell from the ceiling panels in slow arcs as auxiliary systems strained to hold Earthlab together. Captain Marcus Hale stood at the center console, jaw, tight hands gripping the edge like it was the only anchor in a collapsing world. Status, he growled. Reactor stabilization is critical, Alan reported from a ruined terminal, fingers dancing across a cracked interface. If we take one more pulse from that dreadnought, just one, we're done. Linda Chen's voice followed breathless. Temporal stutters are now affecting our systems. We're losing seconds, sometimes whole minutes. Time's breaking down, comms Marcus asked. Dead Daniel confirmed over a damaged channel. Gate links are unstable. Our cross-timeline allies are effectively cut off. Natalie Cruz stood near the observation glass staring at the Noxian dreadnought. It hadn't moved, it didn't need to. It hung in space like a god watching its work unfold patient and exact. They're not just attacking anymore, she murmured. They're watching us disintegrate, like this is a test or a lesson. Marcus turned toward her, eyes burning. Then let's give them something to remember. He stepped forward, voice hardening. Prep the spatial disruptor. Natalie snapped around. You're not serious. I'm very serious. Linda spun to face him. Marcus, activating that will collapse the local field. It could destabilize not just the Noxian fleet, but Earth Lab. Us, I know, Marcus said, and I'm still ordering it. Silence. Natalie stepped in front of him. You'd risk the entire station. If it buys the galaxy another day, Marcus answered without hesitation. Yes. Alan looked up. We'd have to overload the quantum gate, set the disruptor to sync with the gate's oscillation cycle. Exactly, Marcus said. We tear open the gate mid-disruption and let it rip through their fleet. Linda shook her head, eyes wide. Marcus, that kind of energy release isn't directional. It's not a bullet, it's a bomb. We'll be caught in the wake. I know. The room fell quiet. You're talking about sacrificing Earth Lab, Natalie said, voice low. I'm talking about saving everything else, he shot back. They'll take Earth next. Then the other timelines. We stop them here. But that's suicide, Linda whispered. Marcus met her gaze. Not suicide. Service. Preparations began in silence. Engineers worked with hollow eyes and trembling hands. The disruptor core, long dormant and barely tested, was pulled from storage and fused into the gate stabilizer. Alan worked faster than he ever had in his life. 3 minutes until resonance, he reported. If we don't time it perfectly, the discharge won't reach the Noxians. Daniel's voice came over local comms. I've patched a command bridge to the pulse channel. You'll have control if you're still here when it fires. Natalie stood with Marcus near the primary interface. There's still time to evacuate, she said quietly. We could send the disruptor remotely. Save the crew. Marcus shook his head. Too unstable. We need manual calibration right up to the detonation. She stared at him for a moment. Then let me do it. He smiled faintly. Not this time, Lieutenant. Natalie's voice caught in her throat. You always said we fight to live, not to throw ourselves away. And I'm not, he said. I'm buying time. Buying hope. Sometimes leadership means knowing when to step back, and sometimes when to stand alone. She looked away, fists clenched. He leaned in. You get the survivors to safety. You hold the line. And if Earth Lab falls, make sure they remember why we did it. Natalie nodded once sharply, then turned and disappeared into the chaos. In the final moments, Marcus stood alone in the control chamber. Outside the viewport, the dreadnought loomed closer. Silent, implacable. The disruptor core glowed with blinding intensity, feeding energy into the trembling gate. Space began to crackle and distort. Alan's voice came one last time. Marcus. If this works, it will, Marcus said. A beat of silence. Goodbye, Captain. Goodbye, old friend. The console pulsed green. The moment had come. Marcus reached out, placed his palm on the final activation plate. His voice was calm. For Earth. For the future. He pressed the button, and the universe tore open. The spatial gate exploded in light, unfurling like a supernova stretched across dimensions. The disruptor's pulse surged outward, slamming into the Noxian fleet. Ships disintegrated mid-warp. Reality folded. Fractures raced across the dreadnought's hull until it imploded, vanishing into the rupture it helped create. Earthlab was engulfed. Silence followed. The light. Far away aboard an escape cruiser piloted by Natalie Cruz, survivors watched the explosion fade into the distant void. The gate shimmered once, then collapsed, sealing behind it 1,000 possibilities and one man's final stand. No one spoke. Then Natalie whispered more to herself than to anyone he didn't fall. He rose. The light of Earth Lab's destruction had faded, but the echo of Captain Marcus Hale's sacrifice rippled through every timeline it touched. Across space, survivors of the outpost floated in the safety of escape vessels, shaken hollow but alive. They had seen the impossible, a man tear open a gate between realities and use it as a weapon. A commander trade his life to buy a chance at tomorrow. In the weeks that followed, his name became more than a rallying cry. It became a strategy. Inside the Alliance command vessel, EOS Vanguard Natalie Cruz stood at the helm, staring at a wall of holographic projections. Her voice was steady, but her eyes held something harder than steel. "We are not retreating." She turned to the gathered officers, human and hybrid survivors from multiple timelines, representatives from parallel Earths now fully joined in the Alliance. "The Noxians have been thrown off balance," she continued. "We're going to make sure they never recover." Across the room, Linda Chen nodded, projecting the final data from the Earth Lab detonation. Marcus's pulse fractured their spatial network. "We confirmed residual quantum destabilization. Their fleets are no longer able to sync across timelines the way they used to. That means," Daniel added, appearing on screen from Timeline Theta's command node, "we've got a window, one chance to shut their infrastructure down for good." Alan Knight, leaning against a console, folded his arms. "We hit them where it hurts. At the convergence point." Everyone looked up. "They're home," Natalie said. Linda brought up the map, the Noxian central command node built between dimensions. "We've tracked its distortions across 3 intersecting timelines. It's a reality-bending anchor that allows them to exist outside of time, slipping between wars like shadows. We call it the Cradle," Daniel said. "And if we destroy it, the Noxians will lose their foothold across all timelines. No more reinforcements. No more resets." "Then we hit the Cradle," Natalie confirmed. "But this isn't a clean strike," Linda warned. "We'll be engaging in fractured space. You'll experience time warps, multi-phase attacks, even reflections of our own forces." Alan gave a sharp nod. "So it's chaos." "That's fine. We've lived in chaos since this started." Natalie exhaled. "Prepare the fleet." When the final battle began, it didn't feel like a war. It felt like a storm of memory, flesh, and time. Hundreds of vessels, some sleek and Terran, others warped by alien timelines, dropped out of folded space near the Cradle. It was more a phenomenon than a structure, a sphere of crackling void stitched together by impossible geometry. Inside it, pieces of broken timelines pulsed like organs, feeding the Noxian machine. The Noxian Defense Force was already waiting. They came in silence. Massive ships rebuilt since the Earth Lab pulse fused with the scars of the past. Some had pieces of old Earth Lab stations embedded in them, war trophies or salvaged weapons. Their hulls shimmered with chronometric armor, reflecting light and possibility. But humanity had changed too. Natalie stood at the bridge of the EOS Vanguard, her voice calm over the comms. "All wings initiate phase shift formation. Load disruptor mines. Set plasma yield to full." Daniel's voice replied through the crackling warpath. Timeline Theta and Sigma fleets in position. Linda on a nearby ship gave the last readout. AI alignment synced. Memory dampeners active. Ready for collapse run. The moment had come. Natalie spoke, but this time more softly. "For Marcus." And then the sky tore open. The battle was unlike anything they had faced before. Ships twisted through rifts of false time, sometimes watching their own destruction seconds before it happened. Fighters were mirrored, forced to battle doppelgangers of themselves projected from corrupted futures. The Cradle reacted to every attack. It bent space. It summoned echoes. At one point, a section of the Alliance fleet found themselves reliving the moment Marcus Hale died over and over until Linda's disruptor AI was able to cut them free. But for every trick, humanity adapted. New weapons forged with thread steel and temporal memory pulsed with resonance that broke Noxian armor. Tactical AI from parallel Earths predicted attack vectors before they occurred. Alan, piloting a converted stealth ship, launched the core destabilizer, a beam that vibrated at the same frequency as the Cradle's binding layer. The sphere cracked. The Noxians screamed not with sound but through pulses in space. Ships faltered. Their formation collapsed. On the EOS Vanguard, Natalie took the shot herself. The final barrage was fired a payload encoded with the same temporal key Marcus had used in his sacrifice. It was his legacy repurposed into a weapon of rebirth. The cradle exploded inward, sucked into itself fragment by fragment, until time snapped shut like a book at the end of its last chapter. When it ended, there was silence again. Real silence. Not from defeat, but from completion. Natalie sank into her chair shaking. Not with fear, with the ache of something bigger than victory. On the screen before her, Linda appeared bruised alive, smiling. "It's done," she said. Daniel's voice followed. "They're gone. No more cradle. No more war fleets. We're reading harmony across all allied timelines." Alan gave a tired grin. "So that's what winning feels like." Natalie leaned forward, gazing into the now quiet stars. "No," she said softly. "This is what remembering feels like." And they would remember every timeline, every version of Earth that had joined the fight. They would remember Marcus Hale's sacrifice, the gate, the fear, the hope, and they would remember that in the end, humanity didn't just survive, it chose to become more. Peace does not arrive with trumpets or cheers. It arrives with silence and the sound of breathing you didn't expect to still hear. In the aftermath of the battle, the fleet drifted through space like ash after a wildfire. No more cradle, no more Noxians, no more war. But peace doesn't erase loss. Natalie Cruz stood in the observation deck of the EOS Vanguard watching the stars slip past slowly. Her uniform was still scorched from the last assault. Her face was unreadable, as if even now she hadn't allowed herself to process what had truly happened. Behind her, Alan Knight approached quietly, holding 2 steaming mugs. Tea, synth lemon. It's terrible, but warm. She accepted it without a word. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Natalie said softly, "Do you know how many we lost?" "Too many," Alan replied, "but less than if Marcus hadn't done what he did." She nodded, but her eyes were distant. "It should have been me." Alan didn't respond immediately. Then he said, "You think he didn't know what you'd say afterward? He chose that path so you wouldn't have to." Natalie took a deep breath. "I still see the flash. Every time I close my eyes." Alan stared out the viewport. "Yeah, me too." Across the Alliance fleet ships were slowly regrouping, beginning repairs. The survivors were gathering in what remained of their respective realities, trying to decide what a future without war would even look like. On a medical ship orbiting the blast zone, Dr. Linda Chen tended to the injured human hybrid and other. The wounds were not just physical. Some of the soldiers had aged decades during time stutters. Others remembered dying because they had in alternate timelines. One soldier, an older man with gray at his temples, grabbed Linda's wrist. "I saw him," he whispered. "Captain Hale. In the fracture." He looked at me. Linda knelt beside him, touched his shoulder. "It might have been a projection," echoes from the quantum field. The man shook his head. "No." He said something. "What?" The man closed his eyes. He said, "Don't forget who you are. That's the last line of defense." Linda stared at him, heart trembling. Even now he was reaching them. At a summit hosted aboard EOS Vanguard, the Alliance leaders from multiple timelines met to decide what came next. The mood was sober, reverent. Survivors had traveled through dimensions not just to win a war, but to end one. Daniel appeared via projection. "Rebuilding will take years. Some timelines are too fractured to restore. Others may never open again." A representative from Timeline R12 stood. "But we stand. And standing means something." Another from Omega nodded. "We were divided across infinity. Now we're united by choice." Natalie stepped forward. "We were scattered shadows. But Marcus Hale lit a fire that reached across time. And now we carry that flame." She paused. "But peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the presence of memory. We must remember the price." There was no applause, just quiet understanding. In the newly built memorial chamber aboard EOS Vanguard, a single name shone at the center of a spiraling wall of the fallen captain, Marcus Hale, Earth Lab Prime. Around it, names appeared in concentric rings. Men, women, scientists, pilots, children from timelines that had no Earth left. All remembered, People visited the room in silence. Some left dog tags. Others left digital imprints of loved ones. One small girl from Timeline Sigma placed a sketch of man with a square jaw and kind eyes holding the universe in his hands. Later that evening, Natalie sat alone in the memorial. She whispered, "I don't know how to lead without you." A faint flicker passed across the hollow wall. Just static, just memory. And yet, something about the silence felt warmer. Like maybe she wasn't alone after all. Time was once a battlefield. Now it was a bridge. Months had passed since the destruction of the cradle. The stars still shimmered with radiation scars from the war. But between those remnants bloomed something new: connection. Where once the timelines had fought alone, severed and isolated, now they were woven. A new alliance. The Continuum Pact was formalized across surviving Earths and allied species. Technology once used for war was repurposed for repair. Portals re-engineered for cultural exchange. Dimensional engines now carried teachers instead of soldiers. Natalie Cruz, now High Commander of the Continuum Defense Council, stood before a vast assembly of species, some carbon-based, others crystalline, some fluid and bioluminescent. It was the first interdimensional peace summit in recorded history. She took a breath and addressed them all. "We once thought strength came from weapons, from the ability to bend space or time or others. But Marcus Hale taught us that real power comes from choice, a pause, the choice to resist, the choice to protect, and now the choice to rebuild, not as factions, but as a legacy." She stepped back as the crowd stood in silence. No applause, just respect. Among the delegates, Linda Chen exchanged glances with Alan Knight. "She's changed," Linda said quietly. Alan nodded. "We all have." Beyond the summit, on the terraformed ruins of Earthlab Prime's orbit, a new station was under construction, the Hale Nexus. Not a weapon, not a command post, but a bridge literally and symbolically between timelines. Its architects came from 5 realities. Its foundation was laid using technology born from both science and memory. At the center, a crystallized remnant of the original gate pulsed faintly, wrapped in ceremonial steel inscribed with names. Children born after the war played along the new halls, unaware that this station now sat where the fiercest battle of existence had once been fought. And that was the point. Let them play, let them dream, let them inherit a galaxy without fear. Inside the Hale Nexus, Natalie walked the observation deck with Linda and Alan. They watched new ships arrive, civilians, educators, explorers. "Feels strange," Alan said, "being on a station and not expecting it to explode." Linda smiled faintly. "That's progress." Natalie leaned on the railing. "Sometimes I wonder what Marcus would think if he saw this." Alan looked out at the stars. He'd probably frown, make some gruff comment about inefficiency, and then fix 5 things before we could stop him. They all laughed, but then Natalie went quiet. "I still hear him sometimes," she said, "when I hesitate, when I doubt. There's his voice, not orders, just calm, solid, like gravity." Linda looked over. "That's what legacies are. Not chains, guides." A soft chime echoed from the central monument, a crystalline interface that pulsed when timelines aligned. Today it shimmered with perfect resonance. All timelines were connected. All were stable. The war was over. But the future that was just beginning, the stars never changed. No matter how many timelines bled, how many cradles collapsed, how many gates tore open reality, the stars remained eternal witnesses to all that passed. From the uppermost level of the Hale Nexus, Natalie Cruz stood alone in the garden atrium. It had been grown using soil samples from multiple Earths, seeded with flora from a dozen timelines. Flowers that had never bloomed on the same world now grew side by side. Peace at last had taken root. She closed her eyes and listened, not for engines or alarms, but for the sound of wind. Artificial, yes, but pure. The sound of a future no longer defined by war. Footsteps approached. Alan Knight entered, carrying a small case. "You're early," Natalie said, smiling. "You're always early," he replied. "Figured I'd finally catch up." He opened the case, carefully revealing a polished metal plaque. Etched on it were words neither of them had seen in months. "Captain Marcus Hale, guardian of the fracture, father of the continuum." Beneath it, a simple quote, "Stand," even if no one remembers why. Stand anyway. Natalie ran her fingers across the engraving. He'd have hated this. Yeah, Alan agreed, but he earned every letter. They installed the plaque beneath the largest tree in the atrium, a cherry blossom hybrid genetically stabilized to bloom in all seasons, from all timelines. The blossoms fell like memories, soft and unburdened. Elsewhere in the station, children were being taught not just about physics and engineering, but about choices. History now began with Marcus Hale not as a general, but as a person who made the hardest decision with no guarantee of reward. Linda Chen had taken up teaching. One of her most gifted students, a boy from timeline E9, once asked her, "What happens if we forget him?" She smiled gently. "Then he'll still be there. In the systems we build. In the choices you make. Even if I don't say his name even then." Later, as the Nexus orbited between star clusters, a rare event occurred. A fluctuation in deep resonance gates triggered a synchronized pulse across the aligned timelines. It was brief, harmless, but on every ship station and planet tied to the Continuum Pact, clocks paused for 1 second, just one. And in that single moment, those who had known Marcus, who had fought with him or against him, or had merely heard the stories, felt something. Not grief, stillness. A moment of understanding that echoed across the multiverse. An echo beyond the lab. Natalie stood once more in the atrium alone beneath the blooming tree. She whispered, "We made it, Marcus." And somewhere far beyond time, beyond fractures and memory, it felt as if someone nodded. Not loudly, just enough. Enough to say, "You did well." The War Beyond Earth Lab is a saga of sacrifice, survival, and the reshaping of destiny across fractured timelines. It begins in Crisis Earth Lab under siege by the Noxians, an alien force capable of manipulating space-time. Captain Marcus Hale and his team Natalie Cruz, Alan Knight, Dr. Linda Chen, and Daniel fight not only to defend Earth, but to uncover the deeper truth behind the Noxians' interdimensional control. As the war escalates, humanity forges alliances across timelines, discovering both friends and horrors in alternate versions of themselves. Earth Lab becomes the last bastion of resistance, and Marcus Hale, burdened by impossible odds, makes the ultimate decision to detonate the dimensional gate and the disruptor course, sacrificing himself to destroy the enemy fleet and cripple the Noxians' grip on reality. His death becomes the turning point. With Marcus gone, Natalie rises to leadership, rallying the survivors into a united force. Together, they lead a final assault on the Noxians' interdimensional command, the Cradle. In a chaotic battle across fractured space, they destroy the Cradle, using Marcus's legacy, ending the war, and severing the Noxians from every timeline. But peace does not come without pain. The survivors mourn. They rebuild. The Continuum Pact has formed a new alliance of Earths and species committed to healing. At the heart of it all stands the Hale Nexus, a monument not just to war, but to unity. Marcus Hale's name lives on, not in statues, but in the choices people now make. In gardens where hybrid trees bloom. In classrooms where history begins with memory, not conquest. The War Beyond Earth Lab ends not with vengeance, but with understanding that peace must be built, nurtured, and above all remembered.